Well, thank you for including me in this discussion. I really appreciate the invitation by the MRC and NESA Center. And I've already learned a lot in the previous speaker's remarks. So I thought I would try to speak a little bit, again, from a U.S. perspective on um, U.S. objectives in sort of maritime partnership and some of the things the United States brings to the table, and maybe even unpack a little bit what's been going on within the trust, what was previously referred to as ISET, but the trust framework and INDUS-X in particular, which is the India-U.S. Defense Accelerator ecosystem, which I think is actually starting to build some of these capabilities, and finally sort of conclude by talking a little bit about how we operationalize these shared, joint, or even independent capabilities. So I think, Michael talked a little bit about U.S. objectives, and it's good to just confirm this for a minute. Obviously, the United States' principal interest in the Indo-Pacific is still oriented around security. So I appreciate Dr. Das's point that India in particular needs a broader focus, not just a narrow focus on security. I think, though, that that's just not how the United States looks at it presently, and may not for a while. And maybe sort of there'll be an evolution, but I think you should sort of make some, calculations as to what the United States sort of orientation is towards Indo-Pacific, and it is largely in security terms. Now, I do think terms like global south and sustainability don't appear to me to be priorities in this administration, but I think you can get there if you employ a competition framework. So, for example, to make these points about underwater domain awareness salient to the United States, obviously, if you situate it in terms of competition with China, in terms of tracking Chinese submarines or Chinese vessels in the Indian Ocean, but even in terms that you've already referred to in previous conversations about critical minerals or undersea cables or undersea lines of communication, those are all competitive frameworks that will be salient to US policymakers. And also, if you cooperate on them, will result in sustainability and blue economy effects. So that's just sort of a framing point. In terms of what the United States has been working on, I think with India and sort of what it brings to the table, I think there's sort of three categories we can define it as: technology, training, and maybe to some degree algorithms. In the technology area, we're talking a lot largely about sensors. I think that sort of, sonars and sensors has been the discussion thus far. But we're also talking about delivery and platforms. And so in the air domain, you're seeing a lot more platforms being offered or put on offer that enable better sensing capability in the sea and undersea domain. So let's take a look at sort of what we've been doing, particularly in the INDUS-X arena. Uh, you know, um, Commander Parmar, who just spoke, made this point that the United States is unlikely to share technology 100% and not fully open its doors. I think that's absolutely right. That's not happening, and that's okay, right? Every state has its sort of need to protect its technology. That's true of the Russians, the French, the Israelis, the Americans, and Japanese. We all sort of have limitations on what we're willing to share. But I will say that if you look at the delta over the last 10 years, and frankly, even the last 3 to 4 years, you will see a greater willingness to share more than what was previously on offer. And so you see that in terms of export control, licenses, sort of license for production, for technology assistance agreements. Those are all sort of increasing in time, and you're seeing it in products. So I think India oftentimes look to the United States government as sort of the sole source of technology sharing and technology release. But what we are actually seeing is a lot more in the commercial domain. So in air-based maritime reconnaissance, obviously the United States has sold P-8s and MH-60s to India, both for they have sort of maritime domain awareness and anti-submarine missions that are possible. And with that is also coming potentially some maintenance, repair, and overhaul capacity, particularly for P-8s, which will lead to some indigenization of the technologies that are present within the P-8I systems. MQ-9s is another, the sort of the maritime predator drones, Sea Guardians or Sky Guardians. Those are also coming with a number of sort of technology components, whether it's maintenance, repair, and overhaul, production, but also sourcing from Indian companies and Indian startups image sensor chips for ISR, or dual use software for AI technologies for domain awareness. So all these areas you're seeing technology transmission through a commercial deal rather than just sort of outright handing off technology. I think this is happening in a number of other co-production agreements. Shield AI has come together with an Indian conglomerate to produce VBAT drones that will have, they can have obviously a land mission, but also a maritime aerial surveillance mission. And I believe we should see more of this coming in sort of in the next few weeks and months. Co-production of sonobuoys is another sort of area that was announced earlier this year between Ultra Maritime and BEL and Indian DPSU. And there you're seeing again a co-production of a sonobuoy type that is much higher grade than what India sort of produces on its own. May not be sort of the frontline technology, but again, it's a win-win in terms of sort of optimizing both parties' interests and also resulting in technology transmission through co-production. Similarly, I think there was a recent announcement. I mean, there's been a teaming arrangement between Liquid Robotics and SAGAR Defense for essentially uncrewed service vessels, but which have an underwater domain awareness capacity. And I think there was just an announcement this week. The Asia sort of announcement with in the joint statement by both leaderships talked about CERTAS capabilities being provided by L3 Harris and UUVs being developed by Anduril and Mahindra. I think all these, again, in the commercial domain, they are delivering advanced technologies for advanced sensing in the underwater domain that India does not have presently, but will accrue and then will enable the missions that they seek, whether it's in the security domain or the blue water domain. So I want to sort of just foot stomp the progress that I think has been made in the commercial side of things. Again, not 100% of what India is seeking, but a lot more than what was on offer even a few years ago. I think even also independent of sort of just commercial technology, co-production and co-development, you have technology development taking place at a more sort of early stage level. So for example, IndusX, one of its first challenges, one of the first joint challenges between the US and India under the IndusX platform was for underwater domain communications and maritime ISR. And there were prize winners that were by both the Indian and the US side. I think that will lead to some further developments and potentially future teaming arrangements in that development of those technologies. I think there are opportunities, although they have not yet been seized, for joint R&D between our labs, so between our DRDO and U.S. Defense Department and energy labs. One particular area that one of the previous speakers spoke about was, an issue of energy and power. And here, from my limited understanding, there's an opportunity for both countries to get their labs together to develop air aluminum batteries for sonobuoys, which would be sort of a much more durable and sustainable form of power for one of the sort of many sensing capabilities that we'd be using in the maritime domain. You're also seeing a lot of new types of sensing that are being developed by Indian companies and startups, but supported and financed by U.S. venture capital in the electro-optical domain, radio frequency data, hyperspectral imaging. So all these areas, again, new forms of sensing that are being co-developed, whether it's through U.S. capital, technology, or production agreements that are ultimately leading to benefits for sort of Indian underwater domain awareness more broadly. And then the last area that I think we are starting to see more, will have the potential to see more of in the future, is on training. And so much of this, as previous speakers have referred to, is it's not just about the technical or sort of technology capabilities, but the actual employment of them, right? So the diffusion of this within our armed forces, our navies, our Coast Guard, and the strategies for employment to best, not only sort of identify signal from noise, but then to, broadly sort of sense sort of what's going on sort of the undersea domain and how to track, adversary vessels or dark shipping or any of those assets. So I think that sort of the joint training part of this is going to be important. And so that maybe leads to the last 2 points, which is about how do we operationalize these capabilities that we are building together. So the first is integrating some of these technologies into exercises and missions. We have regular exercises. Tiger Triumph is coming up in just a couple weeks. We have the Malabar exercise, which is de facto a quad exercise, as is Sea Dragon, which is a specific which always includes Quad countries, and it's specifically an anti-submarine warfare exercise. All these are opportunities to employ even the commercial technologies that we're experimenting with, either as field demonstrations or field experiments, or actual employment by warfighters in some of these exercises that are already designed to, create sort of subject matter expert exchanges, as well as sort of joint sort of teaming and training. So there are venues for this that I know of in the United States. There are major industry conferences that are tethered to U.S. strategic partners. So like there's recently, in just the beginning of March, there was the Pacific Operational Science and Technology Summit in Honolulu, partnered with Indo-Pacom. And there are field experiments opportunities, including an Indian company that participated in one of these field experiments, but it was a sort of unmanned, drone systems, not I don't think it was a sea-based one, but nevertheless, these are opportunities for the technologies that we're co-developing to be tested, demonstrated in front of potential acquisition officers, investors, other companies for, again, sort of further commercial and co-development. Another one of these conferences is, or so one of these field testing opportunities is Coastal Trident, which is one that I know it's run out of an institution called FathomWorks in Port Hueneme in Southern California. It's been offered to India, to IDEX, for Indian companies to participate in. And I think those opportunities should be seized upon to, again, jointly develop this. The unique situation with FathomWorks is that it is a non-government entity, but it is partnered right next to a sort of a Navy base. And so you have the opportunity for commercial technologies to be tested under sort of military environments and conditions. So you have both, both parties present in those both observation and feedback. And then obviously taking this to the next level, from exercises and training to employment in joint missions. So we have what Michael referred to, the Combined Maritime Force. It's an opportunity to be field testing a lot of these technologies. If we have a future contingency that requires joint patrols or security collaboration, like similar to what we had with Operation Prosperity Guardian, whether India formally participates in it or collaborates with it in an auxiliary or adjacent role, these are opportunities for field testing some of these technologies that we're developing. Also, Task Force 59, which is sort of out of Central Command's naval components. That's a space where you can have sort of testing of manned and unmanned systems, or manned and unmanned teaming for some of these unmanned sensor and sort of vessels that are going to be a critical part of maritime domain awareness and underwater domain awareness. So I think that sort of comes to the final. I mean, I was going to say something about deployment, but I think that's like effectively through the Combined Maritime Force or through quad patrols, you'll get opportunities for deployments. And ultimately, right, like these are peacetime applications, but we want these to be also ready for in case of a conflict time environment. And ultimately, that is about deterring aggression by PLAN vessels, by Chinese submarines that might be trying to stalk and coerce vessels in the Indian Ocean. And that, I think, is always going to be sort of foremost in the minds of U.S. policymakers and security officials. With that, I thanks for the time, and I look forward to further discussion.